Hello and welcome to Everything is Energy. Welcome to the weekly astrology forecast. This is for the week of August 9th through August 15th, 2026. And I believe we've arrived at one of the most important weeks of August. Yesterday, on August 8th, we had the Lion's Gate. Check out my live gathering if you get the chance. Make sure you're on my email list to get all the materials. But beyond the Lionsgate, just a few days after the Lionsgate, in the middle of this week, we have the new moon in Leo, which is also the solar eclipse that takes place on August 12th. And, eclipses have always been understood as kind of reset points or interruptions in sort of the ordinary rhythm of linear time and space. So symbolically, they mark a threshold for us, moments when something that potentially has been developing, especially when it's a solar eclipse beneath the surface, can start to become more apparent. And, this particular eclipse arrives during an already extraordinary period of transition. If we remember, over the past months, we've watched all the outer planets change signs. Pluto, it moved into Aquarius, Uranus into Gemini, Neptune and Saturn into Aries, Chiron into Taurus, Jupiter into Leo. Oh my goodness. And now we have the eclipse in Leo. And this is a sign that's really associated with the heart, with creativity, with courage, with sovereignty, and the willingness to become more fully, authentically ourselves. And so I want to switch gears here a little bit this week and potentially moving forward. Instead of talking about each and every aspect this week, I want to look at the larger energetic picture and I want to talk about the themes because I think that's when I think about how I live astrology, it's really about those energetic themes. So let's start at the top of the week on Sunday, August 9th. This week is kind of a space of adjustment and really supporting us and reorienting toward our future. We have Mercury at the final degree of Cancer today. It's forming a quincunx with the North Node at the final degree of Aquarius. So there's this sense of something is about to shift. And at the same time, the Sun in Leo is forming a quintile, which is the creative aspect with Uranus and Gemini. And, there's something really fascinating about the anaretic, the final degrees of an astrological sign. And, Mercury was in retrograde for a little bit of time here, about a month. It's been traveling back through Cancer and it's been inviting us to revisit you know, memory, home, our sense of belonging, and really the emotional narratives that we've been carrying, conscious and unconscious. But when we talk about the North Node being at the anaretic degree, that points to something much larger. The North Node is where we're headed as a soul level consciousness and as a collective consciousness. So it's orienting to us toward our future. And, North Node in the sign of Aquarius is about community. Let's remember Pluto in Aquarius is about circular power. And so this is about, moving toward what we want to become together as a collective. And there may be a sense today, or at least at the top of the week, that an old way of thinking no longer quite fits the life that we are planning and that we can feel that's out there ahead of us. But I would also say that the Saturn Uranus quintile that happens on this day offers us some creative energy. We don't really need to know exactly what's coming next. We simply need to, have enough openness in our perspective to be able to imagine something different. And as this eclipse week begins, you might start to notice that there's some ideas, some inspirations, some hunches, some nudges that have some charge to them that are arriving a little bit unexpectedly beyond linear space and time. You might also start to notice what feels stagnant and what really doesn't, what feels a little bit stale or not resonant. And so I feel like another way of looking at this is you might start to notice where a sense of curiosity and attraction, new energy is replacing some sense of certainty that might be a little bit outdated. And, sometimes the first indication that we're changing is really just quite simply that the old narratives we've been carrying, the stories we've been telling ourselves, just stop resonating or stop making so much like super amount of sense. Let's get to Monday, excuse me, August 10th. This is a day of, the difference between vision and illusion and about love and truth. Illusion, of course, tells us that Neptune is afoot, but we also have Mercury, Venus, Mars, Chiron, Pluto, and the North Node active today. Super active day, but I think, instead of going through all the little minutia here, I think the theme here is surprisingly simple. And the question that is afoot for us is, what is real enough for us to build upon? What's solid enough for us to begin to put a foundation on? Mercury is now in Leo, and as it enters into Leo, it immediately squares Chiron and Taurus. So, this indicates that our communications might touch some vulnerable places around Taurus type themes, worth, security, confidence, safety. And so, something we say, or even something we've been saying to ourselves, potentially more importantly, may reveal to us where there is still some need for healing. That's not to be afraid of that. It's just awareness is everything, right? Meanwhile, on the same day, we have Venus in the sign of Libra, and it's forming an absolutely beautiful trine with Pluto in Aquarius, just moments before it opposes Neptune in Aries. And to me, this combination feels fascinating because Venus in Libra, the sign that she's at home in, is pretty strongly aspecting two of the three outer planets that have changed signs. So let's look at Venus and Pluto. That means that they want depth. They want honesty. They want relationships and our creative work and our justice and our values to really mean something. But on the flip side, Venus in Neptune, illusion and delusion. There's a chance potential for us to realize that we've been idealizing something. And there's also the potential for us to just simply look for what it is that we hope to see. So today, or the early part of this week, because all of this is cuspy, all of this is a theme, it might reveal the difference between this, between a sense of really deep love, really deep convictions, values that are so inherent in us, the difference between that and projection. Also, the idea of true inspiration, motivation, soul-centered purpose, and fantasy. Also, this notion between what is truly, and I would offer naturally beautiful, and illusion. So I think you can feel as I say that those are very different vibrations. And I think just having heard those words, you're likely going to be able to parse through some of that. And if we're wading through anything in our collective, it's about, getting out of the candy shop and getting into the forest, getting into the stuff that is true, not just the stuff that is a momentary fix or a momentary thrill. We also have Mars trining the North Node, and this gives us somewhere to take all of this energy. Mars wants movement and direction, but Mars also brings a willingness to respond here. And it reminds us, we don't really need to figure everything out right now. We just need to notice what feels alive and resonant and of the right charge that's attracting us to take a step forward. This isn't about a big step because of where Mars is located. It's not about a big step in certainty. It's about conscious action. Tuesday, the 11th. Tuesday is a day of seeing beneath the surface. And, let's remember this is the day immediately before the solar eclipse and new moon. And so the astrology really feels pretty liminal today. The sun is forming a sesquiquadrate with Neptune, Mercury is opposing Pluto, and then over just a couple hours later, it's going to trine Neptune. And Venus closes the day with a trine to Uranus. So let's remember, Venus was just super active, and Venus is now aspected all three of the outer planets that are in that minor triangle. So Venus is absolutely Venus in Libra is bringing herself into that outer planet conversation. But I would say about today, this isn't a day of ordinary mental energy. Mercury opposing Pluto wants to get beneath the surface of appearances. And if Mercury in its most mundane is just about the words that we speak, I sometimes like to remind us that Uranus is the potential to be. There's a couple planets that can be the higher octave of Mercury, but Uranus reminds us that we are the technology that we seek, that our vibration is our communication. And Mercury opposing Pluto is kind of bringing up that narrative a little bit. It's about what's beneath just potentially the words that are said or the image that's shown. What is actually true is what Pluto wants to pull through for us. On the other hand, we might just become really curious about something. We might uncover some, information. There might be a pattern that we recognize, and we might even just there might be something that we've been sensing for a long time that we can finally name, and that we can finally realize that we see clearly. And then, I mentioned a couple hours later, Mercury's trining Neptune. So this is going to help our rational mind open to our intuition, where Mercury will be the 3D version, and Neptune's going to help our third eye move into the communication sphere. The rational mind might also open up to the, symbology, symbolism, dreams, creativity, imagination. I use the word liminal here at the top for this day because the eclipse is tomorrow. So the 3D world, let's remember, is the last thing that pops itself into reality. The world is a vibrational truth before it is a physical truth. And then we have Venus trining Uranus, and this introduces, a wonderful new possibility. If I'm talking about Uranus reminding us that we are the high technology we seek, our consciousness is our communication. Venus in Libra is orienting us towards larger ideals of truth and harmony and balance and beauty and justice. So Uranus is going to kind of lightning bolt remind us, what if we don't have to keep choosing what we've always chosen, especially simply because we've always chosen it? This aspect is going to remind us that our values can evolve, that our creative expression can evolve, that our notions of balance and harmony and justice can evolve, that our relationships can evolve, even our understanding of beauty. But with Neptune so active, I would also say that discernment matters, because Neptune is very active today, the planet of illusion and delusion. On the one hand, Neptune can absolutely help us use our third eye to cut through that stuff. On the other hand, if we're not aware, we can jump on the carnival ride that looks like it's real, and we are just simply looking at the illusion and delusion and believing it. So I would say in the evening, especially, I would leave some room for quiet and meditation. Maybe even write down your dreams, set some intentions, go outside, look at the stars. We are absolutely approaching the eclipse on the eve of the eclipse. And if you got the chance to listen to the podcast for the eclipse, I talked about the eclipse being the moment of stepping into the threshold. I've been talking about this threshold for some time now. And my understanding is that this eclipse is kind of like we're in the doorway. We're not just looking at it and approaching it. And, in the evening before, it reminds us that not everything needs to be fully understood before we go into the threshold. So the big aspect of this week is the Leo new moon. Let's get to Wednesday, August 12th, the solar eclipse. And this is really the heart of a new story. This is the centerpiece of the week. And, I want to keep this brief, as I mentioned, because I've got an entire deep dive podcast about it that's devoted to this. It's astrology, it's larger significance, and the ways we can begin looking at this. I've got a couple videos out there too, if you want to look at your own birth chart and how it's impacted by this eclipse. But for the purposes of the weekly astrology, I think within the story of this week, there's something important for us to recognize, and that is that Leo is a sign of the heart, and creativity and courage and joy and vitality and authentic self-expression. That is, I think, one of the hallmarks of this eclipse. The universe, the world, the collective needs us just as we are. And if we think about upgrading our understanding of what is beautiful, I think some of the stuff that's falling away is what is false. And perhaps most importantly, Leo's reminding us, to rediscover, to uncover, to put our finger on, and to begin to express what is uniquely ours to bring into this planet at this juncture. And so, but before that, before we get to our authentic self-expression, let's remember that eclipses, especially South Node, solar eclipses, they might illuminate some places where we've been living according to an identity that we have already outgrown. Or in another way of putting it, they might shed some light on some places where we've been waiting for permission to do, to be, to become. There's also the potential where there's just something that's kind of quietly creative within us that is just asking for us to nourish it and for us to birth it. And I want to remind us, even though eclipses are absolutely karmic and cosmic resets, and those words sound huge, and they are, eclipses are cuspy. We've likely felt this energy a week or so before. We're going to be translating this energy, working with this energy for the next 6 months. So the 12th of August doesn't necessarily mean that it's a time that we need to do something dramatic. If their meaning unfolds over time, then, instead of asking, what am I going to do today? It's Wednesday, it's the eclipse. Oh my gosh, I would say do a ritual, do a meditation, get present, and then just start to entertain this question. What new story is burning inside? What's in my heart that wants to be creatively brought into the world? And, it's worth noting that we also have several supportive aspects that are surrounding this eclipse. Mars is newly into Cancer. It's sextiling Chiron and Taurus. Venus is forming a creative biquintile with the North Node, which is very fortunate. And Mercury is in Leo and it's sextiling Uranus in Gemini. So this means that the body, the heart, and the mind are all participating around this eclipse. Mars in Cancer, as I was mentioning, Mars in Cancer doesn't want us to charge ahead. Mars right now, especially this week, does want us to act, but it wants us to do so without reactivity and with emotional intelligence. So Mars, when it's sextiling Chiron and Taurus, is going to invite kind of a gentler, more embodied type of action. And, Venus by quintile, the North Node, is going to invite us to pay attention to what we genuinely and authentically value, to express that, to hold that, to embody that. Mercury in Leo, sextiling Uranus in Gemini is going to really help our minds open to unexpected possibilities. That's the other aspect of Uranus. Uranus is a revolutionary planet. It expands our consciousness in lightning bolt fashion. So there might be something new that we're feeling like we want to express. I would also just say that today is a really good day to listen. Instead of taking action per se, if you really feel motivated, absolutely. This is not a day to not take action, but none of this that's happening at all this year is about forcing anything. If the subtle energy outer planets always win, and they are the ones that are on stage all year into next year, all the pushing and the hemming and the hawing in the 3D world is kind of just spinning our wheels. So I'll just say about Wednesday, I'll put a link so that in this so that you can find the podcast in case you missed it. And let's move on to Thursday, August 13th. This is a day about finding our words and touching, feeling into our authenticity, because that is a theme that was afoot yesterday. So, the eclipse might have had some intensity around it, whether or not that was fully about the 3D world being super dramatic. It might have just been something that was activated within us. I would say that what follows on Thursday is really wonderfully simple. We have Mercury and Leo sextiling Venus and Libra. And I really love this aspect coming immediately after the eclipse, because sometimes we experience something before we actually have the language for it. The energy arrives and then the words arrive, if you've ever had that experience. So, Mercury is in Leo. This eclipse is in Leo. And Mercury in Leo is going to communicate from the heart. We're talking about authenticity with this eclipse, right? And Venus in Libra is seeking equal authenticity, balance, connection, justice, harmony, beauty, understanding. So this can be a really beautiful day for communication of all types. If it's spoken communication, written communication, vibrational communication, intuitive communication, you know, I I feel like the intuitive nonverbal communication is as important, if not more important, at this juncture on our planet. And maybe I'll be able to get into that um, next week as the astrology is unfolding. But I think today might be a nice day for, if there's something that we've been hesitant to express, to really look at what the hesitation is about. And if the hesitation has anything to do with outdated beliefs, then today would be a wonderful day to express from the heart. And maybe there's even expressing might just be writing it down in a journal. It doesn't have to be a big act. Again, we're not looking for super dramatic stuff here. We're talking about the type of action that Mars wants when it's in Cancer is to take a step, an authentic step. Friday, August 14th is a day of integration. I call those days of integration when we don't have any major aspects. And so, after the eclipse, I think this is absolutely a welcome gift. And today would be a great day to give yourself some space and to know that there's no correct eclipse experience. Eclipses can stir emotions and memories and dreams, maybe even a little bit of uncertainty, and sometimes even nothing at all. So I would just say, let the week settle today. Let your body catch up with what's going on in the cosmos. If you can, spend time in nature. Nature has so much to teach us, and nature has been what has always nourished us, what has always supported us, and what has always healed us for millennia. So if there's something that we can do, even if it's just eating something nourishing or watering the garden or taking a walk or taking a nap, today's a really good day to return to the natural rhythms that are around us every day. And then let's get to Saturday, August 15th. This week closes with a beautiful conjunction. And I would say that the story absolutely gets bigger on August 15th. We have Mercury conjunct Jupiter at 10 degrees of Leo. So Leo, 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 Leo this week. Mercury is the storyteller, beyond the communicator. Jupiter expands whatever it touches, let's remember. And in Leo, they're both asking us to think bigger about our creativity, our self-expression, our purpose, our generosity, and our authenticity, the stories that we tell about who we are and why we're here. And so Saturday can absolutely bring some optimism. It can bring some big ideas. Those are part of the things that Jupiter does. It can also bring meaningful conversations. Maybe there's some motivation for creative expression. But maybe it's also just kind of this expansion that is this bigger picture, broader understanding of what has been unfolding all week. And I'll just kind of say, every planet has its uplifted aspects and its challenging aspects. So Jupiter can also exaggerate. So we don't need to turn every insight this week or today into some kind of prophecy. This year, I'll repeat, is not a year to necessarily say, I have it figured out, it's this and period, end of sentence. Probably not going to fly right now just because there's so much change. If all the outer planets are changing signs and we don't really have a marker for thousands and thousands and thousands of years of ever having had this happen, we don't really have collective memory for that right now. So it kind of makes sense that there's so much new that's coming through. So, I would just say instead of turning insight into a prophecy, stay curious, stay open. Something that can begin just as a small whisper earlier in the week can become a story that actually resonates for us. And maybe this is the perfect way to close Eclipse Week. We don't necessarily need to know where the path leads, but we're beginning to find language to describe why we want to walk it. And so when I step back from all these aspects, I see like a really lovely progression. We're moving from some reorientation into discernment, into revelation with the eclipse, into expression and integration and expansion. And at the center of all of this is our heart. And let's remember that this Leo eclipse isn't asking us to become a louder version of ourselves. That's the superficial version of Leo. It's asking us to become a truer, more authentic version of ourselves. That's the uplifted version of Leo. And there's a huge difference. And that is, I would offer, where the courage of Leo lies right now. Leo at its deepest is not performance, it's authenticity, it's vitality, it's the life force that moves through each and every one of us in its own unique expression. And, with this eclipse, Leo is the thing that you create because no one else can do it quite the same way as you. It's the way you express yourself. It's the way you contribute. It's the way you love. It's the way you teach. And perhaps it's why this eclipse feels so important with the larger story that we've been following throughout this year, 2026, because the world around us is absolutely changing. But collective transformation is not separate from individual transformation. We are the microcosm to the macrocosm. So, eventually each of us is invited to ask, who am I becoming within the world that is itself becoming? And this week, I would say even more importantly, as the world is transforming, what is my heart? What do I authentically want to contribute to this world? And I will also just close that question by saying this isn't a question you need to have the answer to right now. If you're listening to this, it's not necessarily the case that you're like, oh, aha, I have the answer. Remember, there's not really a time this year where we're going to say, I have it all figured out, period, end of sentence. Just let the eclipse plant the seed and trust that we will have time, plenty of time, the perfect amount of time to discover what grows. Have a blessed week. Happy eclipse season. If you're not already on my email list, join my email list. I have just yesterday kicked off the first of 2 free eclipse gatherings about using herbs and doing rituals with the eclipse and also interpreting your own astrological birth chart with the eclipse. Bright blessings. Thank you for being here. So much love.